Hi guys, welcome to Multiverse. Today we are going to take a look at Hawk and Dove. There isn't that many looks I could come up with those characters, so it took me a while to come up with this video. So what I will do is that we will take first a look at how we can recreate Hawk and Dove in this universe online, at least the male versions. Sadly for the female versions, I don't have enough style on my female characters to be able to reproduce those characters. Sadly, I play a lot more of my male characters than my female characters. So sadly, because of that, I cannot really reproduce the female dove just yet. I guess maybe next year I'll make a follow-up video. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So we're going to start by looking at the looks that I was able to recreate for Hawk and Dove. And then I will go through a bit of history about the characters. As you can see, you can come up pretty darn close to recreating a nice Hawk, a nice version of Hawk in this universe online. It's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty darn close, at least to the first version that I saw in the comics. For the headpiece, the half wings are close enough to the character. You can get the half wing headpiece right at character creation. The Prideful glove are the Raven gloves that you can get once you reach a tier 5. You have to go to the Gotham Wasteland vendor in order to be able to purchase those gloves. For the belt, I went with the Rapture Belt. I have to admit, off the top of my head, I can't recall where I actually got that belt. If you really want to know, just ask me in the comment section down below, and I'll look it up for you guys. For the boots, the tall classic boots always do the trick. These are boots I use with a lot of characters. The main reason is that you can get those boots right at character creation, but obviously there are other boots that I could have used. For the chest piece, again, you can get that at character creation. It's the Chevron Slimline chest piece. Again, as you can see, it works more than well enough with our friend Hawk, but I will look at a couple of alternatives if you really want to in just a bit. For the pants, the New Genesis pants again do the trick quite nicely. Again, you can get those at character creation, so it's not very difficult to get those pants. And for the back piece, I went with the Amazon Stratego. I was able to sort of reproduce the sort of cape that Hawk has. He doesn't really have a cape. He has like these long bits of cloth on his back. But that is about as close as I was able to get within DC Universe Online. Through the years, they sometimes redesigned the look a bit to give him those big spikes on his costume. The Absolute Zero could be one way to try to reproduce those sort of spikes that the character has. But a much easier version would be to use the Ice style. The Ice style, you can get it at character creation again. Unlike the Absolute Zero, sadly the Absolute Zero, you have to get it during the Christmas seasonal. The Ice chest piece is a better option because you can get it much easier at character creation. And you can use the Ice chest piece to sort of try to recreate the new 52 version of the character, although you're gonna have to tweak the colors a bit. Somehow they decided to make it like red and not quite black, like some sort of dark gray, probably to contrast it more with Dove, who's blue and white. So instead of having him red and white and Dove blue and white, somehow they decided to make him red and dark black in order to make it even more the polar opposite of Dove. Not sure if it really works, but that's what they decided to go with the new 52 version of the character, at least early on. It's been a while since I even saw the character in the DC Comics, so I have no idea what he looks like right now. For that, we're going to take a look at the male version of the character. Again, I don't have any female character that could really reproduce Dove at this point, so who knows, maybe next year I'll make a follow-up video, and I'll make the female versions of Hawk and Dove. When I first discovered Hawk and Dove, basically the Dove was dead. And during that first miniseries, that's when we were introduced to the female version of Dove. And later on, they created a new version of Hawk, which was Dove's sister somehow. So we had Hawk and Dove once more, but they were both female versions of the characters. But later on, they brought back the original Hawk within the pages of Blackest Night, and then we had Hawk and Dove once more. The versions that I was familiar with when I started reading the series. We'll take a closer look at that in just a bit. So basically, I recreated the original Dove, who sadly died during a Crisis on Infinite Earth, and was later replaced by a new version of the character. Although we did see that version of the character once more within the Justice League Unlimited TV series, and also within the Brave and the Bold, the Batman and the Brave and the Bold TV series. So let's take a look at what I used to recreate that version of the character. Now let's take a look at what I used to recreate Dove. A lot of what I use is the same as Hawk, but just to be on the safe side, let's go through it all anyways. And also you can even see the color that I used for the blue if you kind of like that blue. So for the mask, I went with the half devil. Well, for the mask, for the headpiece, I went with the half devil headpiece. It works well enough to recreate Dove. The hands, I stayed with the prideful. I probably could have gone with a few pair of hands, but the prideful worked well enough for my purpose. The sector incendiary worked well for the belt. Again, other belts could have done the trick, but this is the one I went with. For the boots, the tall classic boots work well enough. Again, easy to obtain, so I often go with those boots. For the chest piece, I went with the chevron slimline, but pretty much any slimline would do the trick, and we're going to take a look at a few other chest pieces in a second. And the new Genesis pants work well enough, although there is a slight tint of gray in the short parts. Sadly, if we could have really white shorts, that would be a bit better, but what can you do? And for the back piece, I went with the Shaman back piece. Basically, Dove had this little tiny cape that almost was like tiny wings. The Shaman tiny cape is about as close as I was able to get to that look. And of course, you could use the Absolute Zero. At some point, they added that to the female Dove. They added like those spikes around the collars. The Absolute Zero would kind of work for that, but it works well enough also on the male Dove as well. But again, this was more or less inspired by some look that the female Dove had at some point. The same with the Ice chest piece. The Absolute Zero chest piece sadly can only be obtained during the winter seasonal. So if you don't have the Absolute Zero, the Ice chest piece works well enough. It has a bit of a shine to it, but other than that, it works well enough. So that's pretty much it for the look of the characters. Now let's take a quick look at the history of the characters through the ages, sort of. Hawk and Dove were created by Steve Ditko and Steve Skeets. I have to admit, I'm not familiar with that series because that was a little bit way before my time. And at first the series was called The Hawk and the Dove. I'm only really familiar with that series through Flashback, ironically enough. Basically, there were other Hawk and Dove series that were created afterwards, and in those series, you often would have flashbacks of the time when Don Hall was still alive. Basically, Hawk and Dove were Hawk was Hank Hall, and Dove was his brother Don Hall. Their series lasted for a bit, and then they became recurring members of the Teen Titans. So they would appear in the pages of the Teen Titans from time to time. But the first time I really saw those characters was within the pages of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and sadly, it is when Dove dies. That's pretty much the first scene I saw of them. We saw them fighting a bunch of evil shadow demons, and then Dove was sadly slain by one of them. And then I discovered the series Hawk and Dove through the first 5-issue miniseries, and I loved it. I fell in love with that series so much. I can't really explain why. I guess I was just at the right age. I was in the army at the time, and in 1988 I spent like 9 months in the field, and I had the Hawk and Dove miniseries with me, and I carried it with me everywhere, and I would read it and read it and read it. And then afterwards, there was also another Hawk and Dove series afterwards, and I was in college at the time, and I was pretty much at more or less the same age as the characters. You had Hawk was starting college and was struggling a bit, and he was also struggling with the loss of Dove. He had lost his brother during Crisis on Infinite Earth, and he wasn't dealing all too well with losing his brother. So within the Hawk and Dove miniseries, that's pretty much when he came to terms with losing his brother, and also that's when the new Dove was introduced, and that's pretty much when he started accepting the new Dove as his new partner. And one thing that needs to be mentioned, it was one of the early projects that Rob Liefeld worked on. Nowadays, Rob Liefeld is a little infamous, sadly, amongst comics fans. But way back when, no one knew who he was, and he did a great job on Hawk and Dove. A lot of people attribute the great artwork to Carl Kessel, the inker. But at the end of the day, if you didn't have the pencils by Rob Liefeld, you wouldn't have the artwork that we got in Hawk and Dove, no matter what Carl Kessel would have done. So yes, Carl Kessel brought a big contribution to the final look of the artwork, but at the heart of it, we had Rob Liefeld to thank for it. So roughly, we had Hawk who had lost Don and who had to cope with that, and there was this new character introduced, at least I think it was a new character, called Kestrel, which was sort of an evil version of Hawk, sort of, and basically was trying to bring Hawk all the way into the side of chaos, which he was serving, and but then a new Dove was introduced, and there was this sort of tug of war between Kestrel and Dove. Kestrel trying to pull Hawk towards the chaos, Dove trying to keep Hawk towards order a little bit. And it was a really good miniseries. And also they introduced the cast that would follow them through the ongoing series, and those casts were really likable characters. And also there was a bit of intrigue. Like there was this new Dove, we didn't know who she was, and so at some point Hawk goes through this sort of detective shtick where he tries to deduce who the new Dove is, and of course at every turn he ends up being wrong. So at some point Dove decides to finally reveal to Hawk who she is before he keeps on making a fool of himself, trying to guess who she is and being wrong. And then later on we learned that there would be a new ongoing series with Hawk and Dove, and I was really happy at the time, although I was a little bit disappointed, and I'll tell you why. But before we talk about the ongoing series, I would strongly suggest get the trade paperback of that first Hawk and Dove miniseries. It's a great series. I know that there's a lot of let's say infamy surrounding Rob Liefeld nowadays, but way back when it was his early days, and his artwork was almost like an Art Adams, but with less rendering, if it makes any sense. So if you get the chance to buy that series, it's not that expensive, so you probably can get it for fairly cheap on Amazon. And then we got the ongoing series with Hawk and Dove, which was great to see those characters again. It was great to see their supporting cast again. The one disappointing part was that the art team was different. Sadly, for some reason, they didn't take Rob Liefeld back, or maybe he was already busy doing New Mutants at Marvel. Not sure about the detail. Also, from what I understand, there was a lot of behind-the-scene drama while Rob Liefeld was on the miniseries, so maybe they didn't want to get him back on Hawk and Dove anyway, which is sad because then he pretty much exploded, became a superstar. So imagine if he had been on Hawk and Dove, the ongoing series, maybe this would have been what X-Force became afterwards. Like maybe this would have had the success that X-Force had, and maybe this would have been the series, one of the series that sold the most comics ever. But sadly, thanks to some twist of fate, he was not on that series. He was on New Mutants, and New Mutants exploded into being a big success. And this series sadly was cancelled after 28 issues, I think, which is sad that it was cancelled because again, it was a great series. The artwork was a bit funky at first. From what I understand, this was drawn by a guy called Greg Guller. You may know him as he was the designer on the series Gargoyles. You may remember the Gargoyles series that was done by Disney a couple of decades ago. So Greg Guller was the main designer on that series. And somehow he ended up being the regular penciler on Hawk and Dove. And it took him a few issues to get used to the series, or maybe it got me a few issues to get used to his style. But after a few issues, I pretty much started loving his style. But the main the disappointing part, I guess, was that too often when they have, let's say, a miniseries and then they decide to launch an ongoing series, and sadly, too often they launch the ongoing series with a completely new art team, failing to realize that one of the things that made the miniseries popular was the art team. So if you have like a winning formula and you decide to change half of it when you start a new ongoing series, well, a lot of people will jump ship. A lot of people will have a hard time accepting that new series because of the new art team. And I guess some of that happened with Hawk and Dove. Although Hawk and Dove lasted for 28 issues, so there probably were deeper issues than just the change in the art in the art department. During the series, we had a few appearances by the Teen Titans, which was great. The Titans were in a great period at the time, so it was nice to see them appear in anything. And seeing them appear in Hawk and Dove only made sense because Hawk was pretty much more or less a member of the Teen Titans, on and off from time to time, and now we had Dove, who was also part of that group. And also we had the supporting cast, which came back for the ongoing series. And again, it was nice to see those characters once more. And of course, we saw the evil Kestrel make a comeback, and also there was a twist here and there with the Kestrel character. And then there was this whole shtick about Hawk and Dove. Obviously, they were linked to some Lord of Order and Lord of Chaos. Basically, those are the ones who had given them their powers. And then they had this whole storyline where they actually got to meet the Lords of Order and Chaos who gave them their powers. And then they ended up in that alternate dimension where that was almost like a cross between D&D and something else that I can't think of. But anyway, so they had this weird fantasy storyline that lasted for a bit. And then they came back as Hawk and Dove, and they continued their stories as usual. And one of the great things about Hawk and Dove that I didn't quite realize at the time is that they were using a lot of Kirby material. They were using a lot of the New Gods material, like you can see them here against the Female Furies, or at least the Female Furies at the time. But also we had a whole bit about with Clarion the Witch Boy, which you guys know from the Halloween seasonal. And also they had this weird kooky inventor called Kirby, which obviously was an homage to Jack Kirby. But again, without realizing it at the time, there was a lot of Kirby-inspired stuff in that series, and in retrospect, it makes that series even more wonderful than when I first read it a few decades ago. I would suggest, if you can, to purchase that series, but I have no idea if they ever made a trade paperback with that series, a hardcover or an omnibus or whatever. So I have no idea how hard it would be to get a copy of each issues of that series, but if you can, I would strongly suggest it. But sadly, what had to happen happened. The series was canceled with issue number 28. Also, there's something else that happened, is that Hawk became the evil monarch and ended up killing Dove, sadly. One of the reasons why that happened, sadly, is that originally Captain Atom was supposed to be monarch, but everyone had guessed months ahead of time that it was going to be Captain Atom. So to try to get to throw like a twist ball to the readers, they decided to change it from Captain Atom to Hawk at the last minute, so that they would actually be able to surprise readers who had guessed that Monarch was Captain Atom's eons ago. So sadly, Hawk and Dove was no more, as the title says. And we did have a few annuals, although the annuals were during the ongoing series. One of those annuals involved a group called Titans West. It was a concept that came back from all the way back in the original Teen Titans series. They were trying to create this sort of spin-off out of Teen Titans called Titans West. And sadly, it never had any traction. It never went anywhere. They tried to bring back Hawk and Dove from time to time. Like at some point, they had this new Hawk and Dove series that was like two angels that were like musicians in a rock band or something. That was painful just to look at, so I never really gave it a try. Then at some point, they resurrected the female Dove, and they created a new female Hawk to go with her. So we had a new duo of Hawk and Dove. Although I don't think they made a series with those. I think we only saw them in the pages of the Teen Titans. And then much later on, um, I forget how they killed the female Hawk, and they brought back Hank Hall as the original Hawk, and then we had Hawk and Dove together once more. And then they had their own series when the new 52 was launched. Although I'm not sure if they had their own series after Blackest Night. But I seem to recall we did see those characters from time to time after Blackest Night. But I think it was during the pages of Birds of Prey or something like that. But anyway, with the new 52, they tried to give them their own ongoing series once more. And sadly, like a lot of new 52 series, it didn't last all too long. And I can understand why. I tried the first two issues, and I just couldn't do it. They kept Dove pretty much how she was. They tried to quote unquote redesign the Hawk by adding a few spiky spikes to the shoulder parts of the costume. And of course, they made the white in the costume some sort of dark gray, light black. I'm not sure what that is supposed to be, but it was not an improvement. So anyway, so I tried the first two issues. I just couldn't keep on reading that, so I gave up on that series after a couple of issues. But we saw Hawk and Dove in a few other places. We saw them in the Justice League Unlimited TV series. They were there for one or two episodes, if I'm not mistaken. Hawk and Dove are, I guess, there's some niche character that are popular with some hardcore fan base, and some of those hardcore fan base obviously worked on Justice League since they tried to add them to Justice League Unlimited. And then later on, during Batman, the Brave and the Bold, we had also an episode with Hawk and Dove. And sadly, that's pretty much the last time I remember seeing them was within an episode of The Brave and the Bold. I have no idea what's the status of the characters right now in the comics, but what we do know is that there is a live action Teen Titans TV series coming up, and Hawk and Dove will be featured in that series. Will they be regular cast members? Will they be just occasional guest appearance? I have no idea. No one knows. We don't have that much information about the new Teen Titans series just yet. We only know some of the casting, and here you can see Hawk and Dove as they're going to appear in the live action Teen Titans TV series. So for that alone, I'm very excited to see that series. If it's only half as good as Arrow or even The Flash, it should be a pretty good series. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. So that's pretty much it for our friends Hawk and Dove. If I get more styles with my female characters and I manage to be able to recreate a good version of the female Dove characters, I'll see what I can do about making a follow-up video. It won't be soon, maybe next year. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. Although I could also make a follow-up video on that Teen Titans live-action series. So if I do so, I'll make sure to mention what I think of the Hawk and Dove version of the characters that we'll have in that TV series. So that's pretty much it for now, guys. If you have any questions, ask so in the comment section down below, and I'll see what I can do about answering your questions. So, as always, guys, thanks for watching, and hopefully, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.